All right. Are we live here? Good. It sounds like we're live. But yeah, we're just so grateful. We've been working with young people and equipping youth ministers through a gap year and through a theology degree program for the last 22 years. And then is that picking up my cheek there? Oh, the other mic? All right, pull that one down. All right. Yeah, so in the last 2 years, we've started a new ministry, still in the UK, using all the things that we've learned about sharing faith with non-churched young people. And that's just a few things I want to share with us this morning. I hope it's encouraging to you. Should I just switch to this mic? Is it? All right. We good? All right. I don't want to annoy everybody with the ticking. So about 6% of adults in the UK are practicing Christians. Depending what study you look at, it might be 4%, it might be 8%. We can parse over what does it mean to be a practicing Christian, but it's about 6%. That doesn't mean that those adults are going to a church that's preaching the Bible and teaching the Bible, but it's about 6%. The statistic for young people is less than 1% of young people in the UK attend church. And then there was another recent study that came out that said that fewer than 96% of Christians in the UK are leading anybody to Jesus. Fewer than 96%. So it's like, what does that mean? Is it like 10 people sharing faith in the UK? No, I'm not sure the statistics are completely accurate. And there is tons of good stuff going on. You might have heard about the Quiet Revival happening in the UK. It's making headlines. We've seen that in our own local ministry. We've seen that across the country. But I wonder when we look at that statistic, do you think it's higher in the US? Do you think more Christians are sharing their faith in the US than in the UK? I mean, we raised our hands early, so I wasn't going to ask for hands raising, but you seem like quite an interactive bunch. So if you think more Christians in the US are sharing faith in the UK, just like put your hand up. Okay. Ooh, not many. Okay. How about in New Jersey? Do you think more Christians in New Jersey are sharing their faith? No, lower. Okay. How about in Living Faith Bible Church? Do we think more? Yeah. All right. Good. Because when I saw the hands raised for the Boardwalk ministry, I mean that was way more than 4%. So, yeah. So well done, everybody. Guys, here's the deal. I really believe that we as Christians, we do want to share our faith more regularly, don't we? And we know that feeling we get when we get to talk about eternal things. We get to talk about the difference God has made in our life. And you get that feeling like, yeah, that was scary, but this is what I'm made for. And I want to get into more conversations like that, but I think oftentimes as Christians, we just feel stuck. We lack confidence because we're not really sure where to start. We're not really sure if that many people around us are all that bothered about it or are interested in faith and interested in Christianity. And I think that's where Joy and I were. So part of the reason that we felt led to go to the UK all those years ago is I think we would admit we weren't very good at sharing our faith, but we knew if we went, we would have to learn. And so that was a big draw, and we have learned a lot, and we still are learning. So I guess just in the next few moments we have together, I really hope that maybe I can help re-inspire you to share your faith, maybe again or maybe for the first time. I just want to give us some real practical tools. So this sermon is going to be very practical. And then, yeah, maybe just provide some jumping off points. We only have a short time this morning, but I hope to give you some things. If you want to dig down a little deeper and explore this a little more, there's some places that I'll point you toward if you want to learn some more. But I wonder, like, as we start this morning, I wonder if you had to think about what is the barrier that most often keeps me from sharing faith. I wonder what you would say. What barrier most often keeps you from sharing faith? And I've got a couple here on the next slide. You know, maybe it's just like, hey, I just don't talk to strangers. Or, you know, I'm happy to talk with people, I'm pretty outgoing, but I just find it hard to talk about spiritual things. Or, you know, I don't want to be one of those pushy people, or I just don't talk about Jesus. There's lots of different barriers, and I'm going to be very vulnerable this morning. Sometimes I'm not a very good missionary. A lot of days I'm not a very good. So my barrier most often is on the next slide. It's just like, oh, I don't know if I have the energy. Because I know for most people, if most of the people around me are going to come to faith, it's going to take time. It's going to take a relationship. I'm going to have to walk and pace alongside of them. And a lot of times it's just like, you know what? I don't know if I have the energy. So let me tell you a little story about what God's been teaching me. So we have a dog. Lots of British people have a dog. It's a great way to connect with people. Most of my best faith conversations are on the dog walk. It's a little bit of a battle I have with Jesus because I'm not a morning person. So I'd rather just like put my head down and not talk to anybody. But I have lots of great conversations. So there was this one morning not too long ago that I took the dog out for the walk, and I walk into town and around the old church and then out into the football, the soccer pitches, and run her around, throw the frisbee, and I come back down the same path, and I was headed back towards my house, and I passed another dog walker, and she said, "Oh, I just got caught short. Do you have another poo bag?" And I was like, I was like, yeah. So I reached in my pocket and I gave her my poo bag, and then I kept walking, and I was like, oh no, that was my last poo bag. And how many dog owners yeah? So like my dog always does her business way back there at the start of the walk. So never in her life has she done a poo between here and home. But I know what's going to happen today. Today is going to be the day. And if you've never felt the shun of the British public watching your dog poo without a bag, you don't know what shame feels like, okay? So I'm having this conversation I'm like, I gave away my last poo bag. Why do I have to be so nice? Like, why do I keep putting myself out there and then I get taken advantage of? I'm not a very good missionary, okay? Just throwing it out there. And I looked up the road, and it was quite a windy day. And there, like several hundred meters up the road, I saw this poo bag floating on the breeze. Okay, it was floating on the breeze, and it's flying around, but it's way up there. And I'm like, oh man, I wonder if I could catch that. And it's like, no, it's way up there. It's a busy road. I'd have to cross over and get it. And so I kept walking and grumbling, and this poo bag keeps floating on the other side of the road. And I kid you not. You'll think I'm lying, but I kid you not. That poo bag, right when it got to the other side of the road, it crossed over, flew in front of my face, and I grabbed it. And I stuffed it in my pocket. And at that moment, I heard God say, Darin, if you put yourself out, I will give you everything. I will give you everything. Now, that was just a silly story about serving somebody. I think the same is true when it comes to sharing. Darin, put yourself out there. I'll give you everything. So in order to encourage us this morning and give us a few pointers, I want to take us to a passage of Scripture in the book of John. So John is in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And we're going to be in chapter 4, and it will be a very familiar passage for many of us. We're talking about this time when Jesus meets a Samaritan woman at the well. So John chapter 4. I think Jesus shows us a couple really simple tips, simple ways of getting into faith conversation. And I think what Jesus does so well, is he steps over barriers and he stirs curiosity. And I think we would have a lot more faith conversations if we learned to step over barriers and learn to stir curiosity. So John chapter 4, I'm going to start reading in verse 1. The Pharisees heard that Jesus was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. When the Lord learned of this, he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now, he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour, or midday. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. And the Samaritan woman said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. So the first barrier that we see Jesus stepping over is the social barrier. Okay? Now, I don't talk to strangers barrier. And I wonder how many of us get stuck. You know, Darin, I just don't talk to strangers. In the UK, we don't talk to strangers. Okay? If you get on the bus, if you get on the train, we ride lots of public transportation. It's weird if you talk to people around you. Unless it's the Olympics in 2012, then we could all be nice Brits. And why can't we do that all the time? We don't know. But in general, Brits are very reserved. We don't talk to strangers. You don't want to be that weird guy. And I think some of us get stuck at this barrier for heart reasons. And I think some of us get stuck because of a lack of. And I think we can improve on both those. So I think some of us probably need a heart change. I just don't talk to those kinds of people. They have a different color skin than I do. They vote for a different political party than I do. We've got rules and laws and ways of behaving, and they don't follow those rules, laws, and ways of behaving. Jesus had like 10 reasons to not talk. He was a man, he was a woman. He was an important man. He had a bad reputation. He was a Jew. He was a Samaritan. We could go on and on. I mean, if you read the actual translation where it says Jews do not associate with Samaritans, my little study Bible that's got the cheat notes at the bottom says that Jews don't even use the dishes that Samaritans. I mean, that's pretty. Yeah, that's pretty out there. I guess I just want to say, every human being is made. And I think I grew up in church. I grew up in a church where if you believe what we believed, behaved the way that we behaved, then we can have relationships. But that's not how God treats us. That's not how the Spirit works with us. We can build relationships. We can cross over social barriers. God crossed over loads of social barriers when he came, Son Jesus, and came to earth. Okay? We can enter people's world, even if they're very different. And I just love how Jesus stepped over that barrier. It's almost like, you know what? I know your Father. I know the Father in heaven created you, so I can talk to you. We can start a relationship. So I think for some of us, it's a heart change. I think some of us, it's just a skill. So people who kind of know me think I'm an extrovert. Really, the people who know me well know I can pretend to be an extrovert when I need to. And when I was first starting out as a youth worker, I wasn't very good at making conversation. And so I knew I had to learn. So this is what I would do early on. I would take a 3x5 card, and I would write down 3 questions that I could ask. What do you do for fun? What's your favorite subject? Those kind of things. And I would put that card in my pocket because I knew if I didn't prepare myself, I'd walk into a social situation. I'd walk into a group of young people, and I would freeze. I wouldn't know what to say. Now, I never got my card out and said, what's your favorite lesson? But it's just like I learned how to ask questions, and I learned how to get myself ready so I didn't freeze in the moment. And I think a lot of us can learn. We can learn how to step over social barriers. We can learn how to ask questions. I think that's one of stepping over the barrier. Learn to ask questions. What do you do outside of work for fun? I'd love to hear about your family. Those kind of questions. And here's the big one. What kind of question did Jesus ask? Will you give me a drink? Or will you help me? As human beings, especially as Christians, I think we always want to be the ones who kind of have the upper hand. But when we ask people for help, it really levels the playing field. I see that's what Jesus is doing. So he stepped right over the social barrier. Sometimes a heart thing, sometimes. All right, let's keep reading. Verse 9. Samaritan woman, okay, verse 9. The Samaritan woman said, "You're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. How can you ask me for a drink?" And Jesus answered her, verse 10. If you knew the gift of God, who it is that asks, you would have asked him, he would have given you living water. Sir, the woman, nothing to draw with. The well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his flocks and herds? All right. Um, so here we see Jesus stepping over the spiritual conversation barrier. So I think a lot of us are good at building relationships. We're good at making small talk. We're good at that kind of social interaction. But it's like, all right, I'm just not going to talk about spiritual things. We find it really difficult to break that spiritual sound barrier. And I think a lot of times we get stuck here because we don't really understand where the people around us are starting from. And again, we don't know what questions they're asking and what questions they're not asking. A big part of our journey of learning to share faith in the UK is we had to stop answering questions people were not asking. So we were great at building relationships with young people in the schools, community, and we'd gather them in to share faith. And we had all this great truth and all this great information about how the Bible is real and Jesus was real and came to earth and died and rose again and can forgive your sins. And it was like they were not asking any of those questions. And do you know how frustrating it is to feel like you've got really great information? No one will ask you the question. Another recent piece of research called Talking Jesus. And they polled non-Christians in the UK. What questions do you have about life, about faith, about Christianity? And the top answer is, don't really have any questions. And I think as well, like we for a long time is that we're trying to live differently. We're trying to live as Christians. And I'm sure people will notice and ask why we're so nice. We're always amazed at how few people ask why we're so nice. And I think we are pretty nice people. There's a book called Atheism on the next slide. And this is where we find ourselves in our secular Western culture in the UK. People aren't against faith. They're glad that we have it and it makes a difference for us. But it's just like, meh. I'm not interested. I'm not really shopping for God right now. And people often aren't thinking very deeply about the big questions of life. We can entertain ourselves to death in our Western cultures without really having to think about the hard things very often. I think we also get stuck with this spiritual conversation barrier because I think we need new pictures of evangelism. And I think we need to more often see evangelism as a process. I think a lot of times we can get the picture that the only kind of evangelism is that one moment in time where we get all the truth out in one go. Now, God still uses that. But if your neighbors and if your coworkers and if your extended family, teenagers, when you go back to school, if your classmates, if they're going to come to know Jesus, it's going to take time. Most often people need to hear the gospel several times. I don't know if you heard about the founder of Wikipedia. He's coming to faith. I think he's a Christian now, and he's starting to blog about it. But it's been 25 years of a journey for him to come to faith. Jesus points to a process. If we just go back to the previous slide, later on, if you skip ahead, when the disciples come back, we'll get there in a moment. But Jesus kind of points to this process. Hey, people have done hard work of cultivating, planting, pulling out the weeds, and you just get to come and do the fun part. So we need to do all the stages. So yeah, you saw a little picture there. This is how we're talking about a process of evangelism. And people are at all different stages. We can go back to that next slide, Jennifer. Thanks. I think back in the 1950s and 1960s, in the States anyway, people had an awareness of God. They knew most of the stories of the Bible. And our job was to challenge them to make it personal. But more and more, definitely in the UK and in Western cultures, people are starting much, much further back. And we need to see that successful evangelism is helping one person take one more step closer. that's successful. And if we're all doing that, it will change the atmosphere and it will change the culture. Some of you more astute will say, Darin, there's 5 chairs there and it says 4 chairs. You'll have to keep listening or come tonight to figure that out, okay? I won't give that away now. But we get stuck because we don't know where people are starting and we're not quite sure how to stir curiosity. So we've done a lot of learning about what kinds of questions can stir curiosity. For Jesus, it was like, if you would have asked me, I would have talked about living water. Now, most of the people in England aren't going to the well to get water. I don't think they are in Brick, New Jersey either. Most people in the UK are not already looking for a Messiah, like the Samaritan woman had an awareness of that. So we've had to learn what kinds of questions or what kinds of things stir curiosity. So we can just go to the next slide. Again, we often have to, we talk about pre-evangelism or early evangelism in our context. So our neighbors got together not too long ago. We live on a mews. Ooh, that's like a posh name for a cul-de-sac. But it's where the horses used to be kept in the stables. So we live on Miller's Mews. There's about 17 homes, and there's quite a good community there because, on a mews, you kind of know who's your neighbors and who's not. On a street, it's harder to tell where to stop inviting. But we had to get together, and I met Roger, my neighbor, for the first time. And he's semi-retired, and he told me a bit about his work. And he said, but what I'm really passionate about right now is astrophysics. Like, oh, dear Lord. I'm already out of my depth. And yeah, the universe is so huge, and we're so tiny, and how does it all work? And da-da-da. And he talked for a while, and then he turned to me and said, so what do you do? I said, well, my wife and I, we lead the youth at our church here in Whitney. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, I'm not religious. You heard that one before? I'm not religious. Da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, yeah, well, that's really interesting, Roger, that you're not religious, but you just got done telling me about how in awe you are of the universe and how vast and how small we are. Roger, would you say that you are a spiritual person? He's like, oh, now there's a question. Because, there's things that have happened to me that I can't quite explain. And, we're going to have to get together for a coffee and talk about that. Now, again, that's a little question. That's way back here. And I'm not saying that spirituality is neutral. There's dangerous spirituality and there's good spirituality. But it's a stirring question. It's a question that stirs curiosity. Again, we're in this, how do we go from just social relationships to stepping over the spiritual conversation barrier? Just one more example on the next slide. And I love it, Kevin, that you have the sign that says, can I pray for you? And we found that question of, hey, can I pray for you? Is one of the biggest doors into a journey towards Jesus. And I think I used to believe that people who aren't Christians yet can't experience God. I'm like, how stupid is that? Like, God let me experience him before I was following him and obeying completely. And Brent, I know you're getting these opportunities with your golfing buddies, and you've done loads of hard work over years and years and years of building trust. And now they're coming to you to ask you to pray for them. So I just think that's another good way. Again, with our neighbors, our homes are next to the river, and our houses all flooded in November, and our neighbors were over for like a little Christmas get together that we had, and they were trying to sell their house and it was sold, but then it flooded and the sale fell through, and they were just gutted and they were down. And just before they left our house, I kind of pulled them aside and said, "Hey guys, I know you're really struggling, that your house didn't go through and you're ready to move. So we're people of faith, Joy and I are. Can I just pray for you a minute?" And yeah, I'm taking a risk. I'm stepping over the spiritual conversation barrier and like, yeah, that would be great. And so they kind of like huddled up, and I prayed short, no Christian jargon. I didn't close my eyes, and they got very emotional. And again, it was just the next step of helping them take another step closer to Jesus. We're still working on them. Still working on them. All right, so we've got the social barrier, the spiritual conversation barrier. Back to John chapter 4. I'll pick it up in verse 13. Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water, welling up into eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't have to get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." And Jesus told her, "Go call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." So here's the challenge barrier. We can go to the next slide. And I love how Jesus doesn't let people sit on the fence. I often let people sit on the fence too long. But Jesus gets to the heart of the matter. And I know this one especially is challenging for most of us. You're just like, I don't want to be a pushy person. Don't want to be a pushy person. I don't think crossing this barrier means you have to be pushy. Now, maybe here in New Jersey, that's not as big of a deal. As Brits, we're very reserved. I think here in New Jersey, you're a bit more like fine with being in each other's faces and sharing opinions and all that kind of thing. But I don't think it means we have to be pushy. But we do have to be intentional. We can't expect people who don't know God to lead themselves. God wants to use us. them. So for us, it often sounds like this challenge barrier. How's that working for you? So Joy discipled a teenager for about a year and a half, and she'd come sit on our sofa and just about her broken relationships with her friends and her family. And it basically, Joy just spent a year and a half saying, "How's that working for you? How's that working for you?" And just pointing out, I think the next slide as well. We see all kinds of young people making decisions about their sexuality, about their gender, all these confusing things. Say, it doesn't seem like that's leading to the full life that you're looking for. Don't think that's going to lead to full life. This road isn't taking you where you want to go, and I want more for you. We don't know how the Samaritan woman ended up in the circumstances that she ended up in. But guys, we're all trying to fill our spiritual needs with empty solutions, don't we? We turn to money, we turn to food, we turn to love, we turn to lots of things to fill that hole. And I'm sure this Samaritan woman was in that same place. And when we try to fill those spiritual needs with empty solutions, we end up broken and hurting ourselves and hurting the people around us. Jesus says, want more. There's more for you out there. All right, that's the challenge barrier. The last one is the gospel barrier. Verse 19. "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you're a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." Can you see what's happening here? It's the classic, that got a little personal, so I'm going to switch this into a religious debate. Okay? So, that hit my heart, but yeah, I can't follow a God that commits genocide. Or I can't follow a God that hates certain groups of people. And we get into these religious debates. And I love what Jesus does here in verse 21. Jesus declared, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship him in spirit and truth." The woman said, "I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I speak to you am he." Guys, we can get stuck in all kinds of religious debates. And I think there's a time and a place to have good answers to good questions. But we can cut through all the junk and just say, you know what? I don't think I'm going to answer all those questions. I can't answer all those questions. But can I tell you the difference that Jesus made in my life? And people can't argue with your experience. People can't argue with what God's done to transform. And then just to come into land here, this is my favorite part of the whole episode. And this goes back to my little story about my barrier, about, I don't have the energy. Verse 27. So the disciples returned. They were off buying food, you remember. And they came up and they were surprised to find Jesus talking with a woman. But no one asked, what do you want, or why are you talking with her? Then leaving her water jar, she went back to town and, told the people about what happened. And verse 31, meanwhile, his disciples urged him, Rabbi, eat something. Jesus, you're tired. We went to buy food and you're talking. It's time to pack it up and you got to take care of your needs. You got to eat. Verse 32, Jesus said to them, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. And his disciples said to each other, could someone have brought him food? My food, said Jesus, is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Jesus found refreshment on the path of service. And it goes back to my poo bag story, all right? Darin, if you put yourself out there, I will give you everything you need. And that feeling we get when we get to share about Jesus, when we get to talk about eternal things, that can fill us. That can bring us life, not take it away. So I hope this morning there's just a few things. If you've kind of like, I want to get into more conversations, I hope you also can hear the Father say, I'll give you everything. I hope there's also like maybe one or two of those questions or one of those examples. It's just a practical thing that I think you could put into practice this afternoon when you're with your extended family. Tomorrow, you go back to work. But Jesus will give us everything we need, and we can find refreshment on the path of service, on the path of sharing faith. Just really quickly as we close here, I've got like 3 slides left. You guys have been supporting us in the UK for the last 22 years. Again, we've been working with young people who are generations removed from the church. We've seen so many young people come to faith. We've trained youth ministers. We've seen God do amazing things. And just in the last 2 years, we've started a new ministry called Start to Stir. So it's all about equipping everyday Christians like you and me, equipping everyday Christians to share faith in our everyday spaces. Because sharing faith isn't just for the professionals. It's not just for the gifted evangelists. It's for all of us. And if we as a church can unlock this kind of latent army, and we can all be working in all these stages of the harvest field, I really believe we will see a revival. And we will see a spiritual harvest. It's happening in the UK, and I think it can happen here in New Jersey and in Brick as well. So just a couple of things we're doing. Again, we're really overcoming indifference is a big barrier for us. If some of these questions you really found helpful, if we go to the next slide, we're calling it the Faith Sharing Fast Tracker. It's a new tool that we just created. It's just 20 simple questions at each of those stages. So you can scan that QR code. Maybe we'll leave it up at the end too. And it's free. You can just download the questions. You can get them on your phone. But it just helps you. Oh, good. All right, good. That's the last slide, so you're already on it. So yeah, just some simple ways to get more faith conversations. We've also created something called the Stir course. You can go to the next slide. So again, it's a way that we found we can help people see, as a human being, you are a spiritual being. And we can help you experience your soul in action, and we can help you see that your soul really longs for God. So can we introduce him to you? So we've created this really early evangelism materials. It's being used in 400 churches across the UK and in 8 or 9 other countries. So yeah, it's really taking off. We get stories all from up and down the country from leaders, youth leaders, church leaders that are saying it's transforming our youth work. It's we're getting into the best conversations about faith that we've ever gotten into. We're seeing people come to faith, or yeah. So it's exciting the way that you are making a difference, not just here in Brick, but all across the world. Um, and then yeah, I guess you already know about this last slide here. If you want to learn some more about, okay, how do I stir curiosity? How can I point to some of these spiritual longings? How can I build relationships with people outside the church? We've got a little 8-session video series, and yep, it can be great. So it's great for a home group or a small group or a Sunday school class. It's just 8 10-minute videos with a discussion, and you can explore more about all these things that I'm yammering on about this morning. So great. Let me pray for us, and then Alex, come back up. Father, I thank you for this church. I thank you for their legacy. I thank you for their compassion for Brick and the surrounding area, for people to come to know you. I thank you for their faithful witness. And Father, I just pray this morning that Spirit, you would stir our hearts and build our courage, that you can use us, Father. You can use even us to introduce people to your Son and to find fullness and forgiveness and freedom. Father, just make us willing. I think that's my biggest thing. Help us to be willing to be used. Help us to trust that you will give us everything. And Father, I pray for a spiritual harvest in this community and in this church. Pray that they will see many new people turning to you, trusting you, transform. Or do that in this place. We beg of you, we ask in your Son's name. Amen.